some technical difficulties today. So I wanted to begin my monologue, welcome you to Pod TV on World Edition, soon to be a part of the Roku TV network. And we are here today on this show. My name is Steve Rao. I'm the host of this show, and we're greeting you live from the All America city of Morrisville, North Carolina, in North Carolina, the eighth largest state in the United States of America. But we welcome you from all around the world to this show where we talk about global affairs, innovation, and continue to navigate through a post COVID world, what the new normal will be like. We bring all the issues on the table. We have great panelists today. We have Shaquille Latimer back. So I'm going to begin with my opening monologue. And I changed it up last minute this morning because, like many of you around the United States, and maybe you were able to watch it around the world, the NFL championships yesterday for the National Football League were probably some of the best playoff games I've ever seen. The evening ended yesterday when two of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, Patrick Mahomes from the Kansas City Chiefs, went up against Josh Allen from the Buffalo Bills. And it was just amazing. Every minute seemed like an hour in the final minutes of the game as each quarterback brought out their best throws with pinpoint accuracy, moving down the ball down the field to score the necessary touchdowns until a final overtime put the Chiefs in victory. At the end of the game, I kept asking myself, what is it about these amazing athletes that inspires us so much every day, but particularly a game like this, which went down as probably the greatest playoff game in NFL history? Well, I think there's a lot that we can learn from these athletes. They come from all walks of life, from all faiths, from all ethnic backgrounds. But when they get on that field for 60 minutes, they go all in. They give it their best. They do everything they can to call the plays they need to call to win the game. They make the most of the time that they have, and they do whatever they can to come back. And it's not over till the final whistle blows. For every inch that they claw for on the field, for every first down that they get, they have a chance of winning. But at the end of the day, if they don't win, what was the most touching moment yesterday was when Patrick Mahomes went across the field to hug Josh Allen, who lost probably because they lost the coin toss. And in the NFL, in overtime, in the playoffs, the first team to score a touchdown wins. But that act of accepting the outcome of defeat, accepting the consequences of just someone playing better in that one moment and winning, to me, is what life should be about. It's what leadership should be about. And when I look at these NFL athletes, I certainly hope that our political leaders are watching. It's okay to be a Republican and have your values. It's okay to be a Democrat and have your values. It's all right to put it out there on the field and compete for everything that you have. But at the end of the day, you walk away and you try again. I say that because I think that we expect more of our leaders and we're simply not getting it. When we turn on the TV, we don't feel that great about our politicians. We don't feel great about our country because we are in gridlock. We're trying to listen to each other, listening to reply, not listening to understand. Just maybe there's hope. We still got a chance. We still have a minute that we can use. They still have a minute that they can use. And I challenge them and anyone watching this show to stop the noise and let's get to work. On that note, I want to bring in with me Shaquille Latimer from Down Under, who we've missed tremendously. He will be joining us in a minute, and we're waiting for Mark Lee. This might be a little bit of a shorter show. There you go. Sasha Starr is here. Great. From Canada. And we're going to be bringing in Shaquille Latimer, and we're waiting for Mark Lee. Now, I changed up my monologue. I'm going to sort of focus tomorrow, my monologue, a little bit on Russia, Ukraine, Sasha, because I've been studying that a little bit more, reading up on it. But I just wanted today to sort of change up the monologue and really sort of draw an analogy between what I saw, and I know you're in Canada, and you probably didn't watch the football, although there is a Canadian football league. But this was just a remarkable game. I mean, I have never in my life seen two athletes go toe-to-toe This was like Fraser Ali. This was like Apollo Creed and Rocky at their best, toe to toe. Every minute seemed like an hour. And by the way, Tom Brady also lost, which is might be his last game. But you just see such excellence, such a great standard um, of uh, of excellence. And then we come on the show and we talk about whether you're Republican, or Democrat, the things that you're doing, and I just think it's quite amazing. So anyway, I just wanted to get your thoughts about that.
That's not probably the right idea to ask me about anything to do with American football. No, that's not my specialty. If you want to ask me about chess, soccer, tennis, it will be hockey, basketball even. I will be glad to answer.
Well, but I mean, Shaquille, my point I was trying to make today was that it just seems like, even though it's football, you can draw the analogies to just life in general, putting out your best, respecting each other, respecting our differences, and moving on. I mean, Shaquille, you and I have many different opinions, but there's a profound respect for each other, right? We don't agree on everything. And the point I was trying to make, gentlemen, is that that's just missing today in our political process here, in America. And I think we can see this with kind of the noise coming in on both sides, and there just seems to be a civility gone. So I just want to throw it out there as an observation. And if you're listening around the world, we're going to talk about other things today. But Shaquille, any thoughts on that? We just were talking about a great football game yesterday.
I'm sorry, I can't really make any comments on the American football. I'm afraid, obviously from Australia, I don't watch it. What I will say though is you're right. I think that the civility is gone from politics, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that it should be gone. I've met and I personally know a lot of politicians, right down to from county commissioners to federal senators and congressmen, to members of parliament in Australia and the UK and elsewhere. And almost everyone that I know goes into politics with the idea they're going to make the place a little bit better. And I think understanding your opposition and understanding where they're coming from and understanding that they actually do represent the views of often millions of people is a really important thing to be able to do. And if you instead attack the other person on a personal level, I think that does a lot of damage. And I'll harken back to say to people, go back and watch the Richard Nixon JFK debates. You may look at them today and view their presidency and their policies in whichever way that you choose, but the way that they treated each other, the deference and the politeness that they treated each other with, I think that's really missing. And even in more recent times, Bill Clinton versus George Bush Sr., there wasn't a lot of attacks personally there. It certainly wasn't the mess that was Trump Biden in those debates. But, we've just seen a lot of viciousness in politics, and it's not just in America, it's elsewhere. And I don't think we need it. And I think that we should say to our representatives that that's not how we interact with each other. So that's not how they should interact with each other on our behalf.
But well, we're going to get. So anyway, we welcome you all to the show. Shaquille, it's great to have you back. And as we prepare to join the Roku network, we're going to be changing the format of the show. So bringing in more guests. So we're hoping to get a guest on Wednesday on India Republic Day. It may be Mr. Chowdhury, but it could be someone from Washington, D.C., who is the chair of the U.S.-India Political Action Committee and is very involved at the national levels between the United States and India. And we're going to just talk about democracy in India, some of the things that are going on, and also what the U.S. foreign policy is towards India. He's going to be with Sanjay Puri, most likely. And I don't know if you all watch Young Turks on YouTube TV, but what I like about that show, and I like the World Edition to be that way, is we, not on a progressive point, but throw out the issues and then ask each panelist what your thoughts are. So that's what I thought we were going to do today.
But all the panelists there have the same thoughts, and they go after.
Yeah, well, no, Shaquille, we're not going to do that. We're not going to be like Young Turks. But let's start with our first issue of the day, since we've got the man down under. Shaquille, we have got to hear your thoughts about the Australian government and Novak Djokovic being sent home. Of course, us tennis fans are upset that we're not going to be seeing history made to get that 22nd major. But what are your thoughts? Do you stand by the decision of your government, and do you believe that he got what he deserved?
Well, first of all, we'll just say as well, because we didn't sort of acknowledge it last year, it is actually Australia Day on January the 26th as well.
Okay.
So I know that's a big day for India, but we should perhaps mention it on our show.
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to be here for it because I'll be out on a yacht watching the fireworks. In relation to the tennis, so I'll start with the last question. Do I stand by my government's decision? I don't stand by any government decision made by any government ever. I think that there probably could have been a better process. From what I understand, there were visa issues. I don't like the fact that a court actually ruled that he could stay, and then that was overruled by a minister. And the way to resolve that within our domestic structure is to apply to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. I think that's a messy way of doing it. And I think that Australia should have a check and balance against parliamentary power like they do theoretically in the United States. But there is no check and balance in Australia. So I think that it's a poor show off the Australian system. In relation to what he did, from what I understand, he did breach the rules, and the rules therefore dictate that he should be removed. I don't like it. I think that has, really weakened the Australian Open. But those are the rules, and I guess if you're a politician, if you're that minister and you're stuck in that position, what do you do? No matter what decision you make, you let him stay. People are going to say it's favoritism. You're letting the elites do what they want to do while the little people can't. If you kick him out, you're going to upset Serbia. You're going to, perhaps make the sport less attractive to watch to some people because they're going to be missing out on a great tennis player playing. So I think that's a difficult position. The last polls that I saw actually showed that 77% of Australians believe that he should have been removed. So, you have to stand by the will of the people, I guess, and their views. I don't like it, but I don't like what he did either. So it's I should be a politician with that answer. I didn't give you one.
No, well, and I know where Sasha stands. I mean, it's a loss for tennis, but I think, simply just getting a shot, we don't know what the French Open is going to do, but, look, things are looking like they're opening up in the down now with Zverev losing. So we'll see, but hopefully we'll see some good tennis. I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to Sasha's.
My understanding of this was that he believed that he had an exemption, and the exemption allowed him to enter without having had the vaccine, and the Australian government didn't agree. Now, whether that's the management, his manager's fault, whether that's, Australian immigration not giving him correct information, whether that's his fault, who knows? But as I said, as far as the decision that's been made, I would have liked to have seen him play. But, I can understand the difficulty that Australia would have if he did in fact breach the rules in the way that they are suggesting, then, for them to allow him in would make other people who have been in lockdowns, Australia, a lot of Australians, especially in New South Wales, have been in lockdowns for 3 or 4 months last year. As you remember, I couldn't leave the house for some time. Victoria, which is where the state where the Australian Open's being held, they've had rolling lockdowns now for a couple of years. Their way of life has been severely impacted. And so the idea that somebody could come into the country, it would appear to a lot of people down the bottom that it's one rule for the elites and a different rule for everybody else. That's not going to bide very well either.
I think it's not only a desire of Australian people, but it also is a fact that very few people, tennis players who are playing in Australian Open, were vocal in support of Djokovic. Very few, if any. Actually, I'm aware only Nick Kyrgios. He was in support of Novak and actually offered him to play doubles together in next tournament. Beside Kyrgios, actually some people were vocal in saying that he should not be allowed to play. There was also a concept of, actually two concepts. One is that other 256 players altogether, men and women, all of them were vaccinated. And here comes Djokovic, and Djokovic doesn't have to be vaccinated for whatever reasons and so on. So that's already a very difficult proposition to accept. Yes. Now, another one was that Novak Djokovic essentially believed that he is bigger or just as big as Australian Open altogether. So it's him against Australian Open. And that's a big mistake because Australian Open is much bigger than Novak Djokovic. And I think that's his miscalculation. And the three, now he has to make a choice what to do. The French Open is coming up. And what is he going to do about it? Never mind, even if Nadal is not going to win his 21st Grand Slam and remain at 20. Now, Djokovic wants to prevail and make 21. In that order, he has to play in Paris. To play in Paris, he had to get vaccinated, period.
And yeah,
How
and that's
he's
just
going
not
to do it? I don't know.
Well, that's a good. Let's go to the next issue. That's a good segue when Shaquille Latimer talked about elites, and that's Prime Minister Boris Johnson. And there's been now speculation he's been through a number of issues before, and he's gotten through. But this one is based on the fact that simply the Prime Minister and his conservatives are holding themselves to a different standard, and so there are efforts being made. He's been asked to leave. Not sure when it's going to happen, whether they got the votes to do it. If he is ousted, the next heir apparent to be the prime minister will be the first Indian born or Indian, I guess, an Indian ethnic background, Rishi Sunak, who is actually the son-in-law of Narayan Murthy, the CEO and founder of Infosys. So do you guys think Boris Johnson is in danger? Is it just more noise? He survived quite a bit. Sakil, what do you think? Thoughts?
Look, I think that Boris Johnson has really done a disservice to the Tories. Just in general terms. I have to say I feel for Theresa May because I think that she did the best she could with a very difficult, in a very difficult situation with Brexit. And I think she tried everything that she could. She actually came out and gave a speech from Downing Street where she explained all the things that she tried and said, look, we're just at a logjam. I don't know what to do. I don't really think that she should have needed to leave as the prime minister. Brexit was a mess. Should it have gone back to the people? Probably not. I don't think it should have gone back to the people necessarily. They already made their decision. But Boris Johnson really came about because of what people in the UK felt was the mess that was Brexit. And he even acknowledged that when he gave his speech, where he said that there'd be a lot of people who have voted Labor for generations whose hands would have quivered as they marked one in the Conservative box or in the Tory box. And he really has had a huge platform. He's decimated the Federal Labor Party, well, not the Federal Labor Party, the British Labor Party, absolutely decimated them in the last election. And then since then, I think that he's really not performed as well as he should have. Yes, he's done Brexit, but he really hasn't done a lot of the other things. And I think that even diehard Brexiteers are unhappy with him. I think Conservatives are unhappy with him. He's sort of going back to some of his old, Lord Mayor of London days. I didn't think that he was quite the right person for the job. I think actually that some of his original appeal was some of the rebelliousness that came out because of Trump. Trump appealed to a lot of people in America by pointing out the problems in Washington. I'm not sure that he really solved those problems. He just pointed them out. But that's a pretty good way. It's a pretty easy way of getting a lot of support because most people, left or right, are going to not like the government and their processes, which can be very, very clunky. I think Boris Johnson kind of tapped onto the back of that in the UK. And so you had a very, very divided UK. They all came out in very, very large numbers to vote the Tories in order to make sure that there would be a Brexit, even if it was a hard one. Now I think it probably is time for him to go. Look, I really don't care the colour of the skin or the ethnicity of the front runner to be the prime minister. I don't think he'll actually get it, to be honest. But whether he does or not, his ethnicity, I really could care less. Look, I think the next election will be quite telling. But a lot of those seats the Tories won are going to go back to Labor. That's inevitable. I think the Labor Party needs to move away from the extreme left policies of Jeremy Corbyn and come back towards the centre, come back to fighting for the everyday British worker, especially in the northern parts of England. Scotland as well have got their issues. Obviously, they didn't want to leave the EU. So I think the Labor Party does have some work to do, and I think that they will obviously regain some of those seats. And it's up to the Tories to decide what kind of party they want to be and to come back to the core things that they believe in. Small government, low taxes, less regulation, that sort of stuff. It's a brand new day for England and the UK in general. You know, they're out of the EU now. They're the masters of their own destiny. They can make a lot of choices for themselves. I think that they have an enormous opportunity, and I think if they do it right, they will have an economy which is the world's leading economy as far as growth. I think that they have the most amount of potential to do it, but they have to do it right, and that's going to require, some real leadership, and I think some bipartisanship in the House of Commons.
But Sasha, any insight on that? Great analysis, Shaquille. Exactly what we're looking for in the show. I think you summed it up so well. I think
I do occasionally pay attention to my own countries.
No, I love the way this. I like going issue by issue like this. Very professional. Thank you, Sasha. Any thoughts about that before we go to our next issue of the day? Which I'm going to start with you.
Well, listen. The fact that people voted for Brexit doesn't mean that if referendum would be happening today and the question would be whether to join European Union or not, it's quite unclear what result would be, because in several years' time, people, A, can change their minds, B, sees the reality of what Brexit brings and so on versus what membership of the European Union. I'm not a proponent of Britain joining European Union anytime soon. However, the possibility to have such a referendum would be quite interesting. I remember several years ago in Canada was a referendum whether Quebec should become independent country and leave Canada, and they were very close to winning. They were like 49.56%. So they were just on a margin of victory in this referendum. And they were preparing second referendum a few years later. However, at that time, there was an economic study. What's happened with Quebec, if it will indeed leave Canada, will take a proportionate debt load of whatever Canada's debt was at the time. So they will have, they had probably close to 30% of population, so they would have quite substantial debt on their shoulders. And they came with the idea that they will just not survive economically. It will be a complete failure. And so they never had second referendum, therefore.
Can I just say, though, I do believe that it should be up to the people, and if the people of Quebec want to have their independence, at least the least that they should be able to expect is to be their own self-governing territory, which they, by and large, actually are in Canada. So, things like that I think are important to recognise. In relation to Brexit, look, at the time, I personally would have preferred to see the UK stay. However, I've changed my opinion on that over time. I've listened to the arguments on both sides. And the only reason why I would like the UK to stay in the EU is because it's in my interests, actually, because I travel a lot and I'm obviously a British citizen. So it's in my interests for them to stay. It makes it easier for me and the businesses that I am involved in. But from a pure perspective of where do I stand on issues, I think it was absolutely correct for the UK to leave. And I think that you'll actually find that people's opinions have actually hardened on that. People now believe that Brexit should have actually happened, and I think that they've become a lot more committed to that position. So that's an important thing. But I just want to harken back in time. We'll just go back slightly back to the American Civil War. Of course, slavery was a major part of the reason for that war, but in coming into that war, the South wanted to secede for a number of reasons. And one of the reasons was that the taxation system in the US at the time, to do with tariffs, basically hurt the South and favored the North. And so the South said, we've had enough of this. We want to actually leave. And the will of the people, and Abraham Lincoln and Republicans of that day were attacked quite viciously in Southern media at the time for not respecting the will of the Southerners wanting to secede. So I think it's really important to put things in context. When you force people to stay, in a country that they don't really want to be in, or in a political system that they don't want to be in, that normally is going to result in civil unrest. And we've seen that all through history. Now, obviously, in Quebec, we haven't seen dramatic violence there, but there has been a lot of conflict in Quebec, and over the just in the last 50, 100 years, there has been a lot. There's been a lot all through Canadian history. So and look at the Catalonians in Spain. You have that same issue, and I dare say, Sasha, and I'm talking out of school because you'll know more about it, but the annexation of Crimea and some of the other former USSR countries where the whole country doesn't want to go back, but parts of the country would like to be part of Mother Russia again. These are conflicts that I think that we'll continue to see. And I think it's important that there is a democratic way of resolving it, or a more peaceful way of resolving it, rather than it being reduced into war.
Yes. And we have with us Mark Lee. Mark, thanks for joining the conversation. Let's go real quick. I'm going to go to our next issue. I'm going to start with Sasha, and we're going to talk a little bit about Russia, Ukraine, but focus a little bit more about that tomorrow. On Wednesday, as I said, we have a guest, Mr. Probably Sanjay Puri from the U.S. Impact, or someone on India Republic Day. And then Thursday, Jeremy Robbins from the formerly New American Economy, where I'll be opening up with my monologue on my op-ed on skilled immigration and fighting worker shortages in the U.S., but we're going to talk about immigration. But let's go to inflation. So White House economists, our White House is saying that it's global and that it's not only the U.S. fault, but economists are still standing ground, saying that there's so much money in the system that it's led to the surge of prices. Sasha, do you agree that on this issue, President Biden is actually incorrect in pointing the finger globally, in that it's the massive amounts of money in the American system that are pushing up the prices? Or is it demand driven, which is just that there's just demand for products, demand exceeding supply?
It's a difficult situation. I think all of them is true. There is a demand, there is a shortage, there is a shortage of workers, which is incredibly difficult to cure, because as it is now, America hasn't embraced immigration policy to bring more and more people to US, so the more and more jobs would be filled, because a lot of American, I'm talking about born Americans, they just refuse to work. They don't need work, really. So they can sustain themselves with all the government subsidies and everything else. They can go for the next, say, 5 years easily without working. And it doesn't matter whether you pay $20,000 or $40,000 or even $60,000. They just don't need the job. They enjoy their freedom. They enjoy to do whatever they want. So they drink beer and watching Netflix.
It is easy to get lazy. I've got 2 companies I serve on the board. I get paid for the first time in my life. I'm on board of 2 or 3 companies, and I get a check, and I'm not doing anything, and it's really weird. And like, man, if I had a few more of those, I might just kick back and watch movies and relax and just let yourself go.
And it's very addictive.
It's very addictive.
Steve, I can tell you, stay in the corporate world and stay in politics, because those are the only jobs where you get that. Checks for doing nothing.
Well, I got to tell you, you got to push yourself. Today there was a no school day, and I slept till 7:30 today in the morning, and that felt wonderful, because normally I'm up at 5:30, 5:45. I got to tell you, I'm going to like that extra hour and a half of sleep when my son goes to college. But I had to push myself. Otherwise, I could get lazy real fast, because I started thinking about going to IHOP and having some pancakes, and then, can I go to the Matrix Resurrection movie? And I'm like, no, I've got to work. But let's go to the next. So let's go to Shaquille real quick about inflation, and then we'll go to Mark Lee. Shaquille, inflation. And I know where you stand on Joe Biden, but we graded him last week, as we talked about his first year in office. I know if I use the word celebrate, you're going to smirk at me, but inflation, do you think the president is pointing the finger here, and that it's his fault, so to speak, because of the trillions of dollars that he's pumped into our economy all at once?
I was going to address something else that you said about working. People can think that, hey, I don't have to work anymore, this is really fun. But a lot of wealthy people, for example, that don't have to work, they get bored very quickly. And I find myself in that category quite a lot, where I sit around going, if I'm not doing anything, what am I going to do? So I don't think that that's sustainable, and I certainly don't think that bringing new people into America while you've got people who aren't working is a good idea. I think cutting social services and social payments would be a better way of dealing with that, if it's not directly related to COVID. In relation to Biden's spending, I'll be generous to the man, more generous than he deserves. I actually think that some of his spending makes sense. In the first place, the actual infrastructure bill, not this human infrastructure nonsense, the actual infrastructure bill of building roads and schools and building libraries and internet services and all that, that makes sense. That adds to the value of the asset base of the public in America. And it was something that he actually stood for in his election campaign, and he won the election. So that absolutely makes sense. I think that spending in a time like this also makes sense. The Federal Reserve was criticized very, very heavily by a number of economists, most notably Milton Friedman, criticized the Fed for exacerbating the Great Depression by not putting more money into the system at the time that the economy needed it. Now we have another situation where this calamitous event has befallen the world, and the Fed has decided to increase the money supply, and then they get blamed for rampant inflation. I think that there is a very delicate balancing act. The question that I really have moving forward is not so much about the current rates of inflation or the current increase in the money supply. The question is, what is the plan moving forward? We ask that question to Kamala Harris, and all she does is cackle. That's not an answer. So one of two things has to happen reasonably. One is the economic output of the United States needs to increase dramatically in order to take up that increase in money supply, and that will help to stabilize things. Or two, that the money supply needs to decrease by the Fed actually taking money out of the system. Now, if you do the latter of those two things, it's going to be a little bit awkward, because when exactly do you do it? The bond markets are pricing in an early rise in interest rates. So we are going to expect to see that. We're also going to expect, as I said, to see the Fed starting to buy back some of the things that they've put into the market. So that's going to be something that we need to watch. The rest of Biden's spending plans, I think, are absolutely absurd. It's just complete insanity. Because of what he wants to spend the money on. There's no return on that money. It's a temporary Band-Aid. It's not sustainable. It's not something that you can do forever. And I think he's just doing it to appeal to a base right now without caring at all what that means for the country in 10 years' time. And at a time when the United States has $150 trillion in unfunded liabilities, this is just reckless. And I think it will be remembered in history by future generations as being a terrible, terrible move.
Mark Lee, welcome to the show. Before we get to Sasha, what are your thoughts on that? Shaquille, thank you very much.
Yeah, like I said, inflation has definitely been a raising concern here in this area and around America and everything else. And people are talking about still the supply chain issues and whether there's going to be enough goods and items of that sort. I've talked to several friends of mine, not just here in Durham, but in other parts of the country that are still concerned and still worried about whether they're going to have enough things in their household. And, one of the things that Nick talks about is whether the amount of people that don't have enough money to survive a disaster of any sort. And definitely we're having that going on now, while we're having people that are concerned about a number of things going on in the world, whether that's people still being concerned about the impact of the pandemic. And then yesterday I was actually hearing some people that were concerned about even some of the things that are happening in our house and all of that, because Shaquille would be glad to know they were actually concerned about some of the things that are going on in terms of like radon levels and things along that line, because they were saying that, hey, maybe we have too much electric equipment in our houses and things of that nature, because they were saying that a lot of times that can make our health very unhealthy and can cause all kinds of problems. I think some of that might be tied into the whole 5G conversation that is going on as well. So that was a very interesting conversation that I was part of yesterday. And I don't know whether folks in Australia are concerned about having too many microwaves and computers and other things attached to each other that could be causing health concerns, the way that this one lady that I was talking to was mentioning, who I believe is a Syracuse professor, or at least involved in that kind of area and everything. But, that's just kind of like those things that are going on that people are somewhat concerned about and that people are definitely worried about in this economic climate. I do agree with something that Shaquille said, that a lot of people would like to see those infrastructure parts of the bill going that are dealing with the roads and the bridges and things of that nature. There are some folks that still need some of those safety net programs. There might not be as much need for some of them because there is definitely some pork, to use that political phrase, that is involved in some of the things that have been proposed and all of that. So there are some things that probably need to be at least realigned, or at least kind of like put in a better structure so that they can still help those that need the help, but not necessarily going into the pockets of some of the folks that might be part of lobbies and other things that are tied in to some of those proposals that are out there and all of that, because we do know that the lobbyists get their nice fair share of the money as well. But there are some programs, I mean, right here in Durham, there's some people that are facing things, dealing with environmental crises in their homes with asbestos. And of course, there's still people that are dealing with crime and other things along those lines. Shaquille will be glad to know that I did talk to one of the mayor's people, the mayor in Durham's people in our new city council, Leonardo Williams. And he was like saying that he was actually not as concerned about gentrification as he was gentrification with displacement. So that's kind of the way he was looking at it, was that gentrification can actually be very good. We're talking about the development of urban areas and even the development of downtown areas.
Yeah, I just find the whole thing to just be this sort of incessant whinge fest, right? The police are terrible. Let's defund them. Let's get rid of them. Oh my goodness, crime's out of control. The government doesn't care that crime's out of control because crime is disproportionately out of control in black areas. So it must be out of control because of racism. Then you put police in there. The police are racist. Once again, you sit there and you complain. Look at how run down these areas are, especially areas run by Democrats. They're all run down and terrible. They've got no internet. It's horrible. Property developers come in. They say, look, we'll buy it all up. We'll build the infrastructure. We'll take the load off the government, because when they have to build, when they gentrify an area, they build the roads, they build the underground wiring, the internet service, they build the whole lot, and then they complain, look, you're racist, you're getting rid of all these areas that the poor people live in. I mean, you can't win. You can't keep the left happy, and there's always going to be a whack job to whinge about something.
But there's another
hold on a second.
Right here in Australia as well, it happens.
Shaquille, once again, you misunderstood what I just said. I just said that the person I was interviewing and that I was talking to was actually more of a moderate, which I consider myself to be as well. Go back and watch the interview. You're laughing all day long, but one of the things he said was that he actually supported developers, which I also support, is developers coming into town. You just would like to support the local developers and things of that nature, because you can't support your local developers while at the same time supporting some of the national and international developers. He also said, that's why I said urban renewal or gentrification with displacement. So there are ways that you can do it in a way that you address the displacement and that you also allow the people to have the urban renewal that is taking place and everything. So that's another thing that I was saying. So there are ways that you can do this and both people can be happy.
Mark, which is what? Let's
and
not,
hold on a second.
Let's not use all this flowery language. What you want to do, I'm just going to go out on a limb here. When you talk about addressing displacement, I can just assume that the proposal would be that the developers come in and develop all of this and give homes, or you're going to call them set-asides or whatever you want to call it, to the poor people that otherwise couldn't afford them, so they're not displaced. Would that be fairly close to what you think would be a good idea?
No, that would be totally inaccurate, because that would be what they say about assume. And you know what they say about assume. I don't have to go into the whole acronym about what they assume, what assume means and everything. But it definitely says a backside of you and me and all along that line. So one of the things that you can do is that you can find ways to bring the money in. You can find ways to bring the money in, help them get money that they can actually then afford the apartments that they need to have and everything. You don't have to do these other things that you're talking about.
Say something in this flowery language. Bring the money in and then help them to be able to afford it. So in other words, give them the money for them to be able to afford it, right?
No, you don't have to give them the money. You can make
how are they going to get
them the jobs that they need in order to get the money that they can afford.
You can also
not have the money. You can also put things into place so that people are not forcing their rents way up, because there are people that are forcing their rents way up. There's a case right here in this city and in other cities where they have gone and they have actually said that the absentee landlords are actually bumping the prices way up, and they're being called out to the carpet for that. And
Okay,
rightfully
well,
so.
okay. Well, let's just address a couple of things. Firstly, you are sitting there in the United States right now today with the highest rates of wages being offered to people in US history, and yet you have an enormous amount of people that are not participating in the workforce. So exactly what jobs are you planning on giving these? But that's firstly. But secondly, I'll address this other wonderful thing that you've said. Let's repeat what you've said. Let's repeat the second bit of what you've said. I'm going to address that bit by bit.
Well, what are you talking about? I'm saying that one, you can make the jobs available, and there are jobs available, including some of the corporate jobs that are available, where some of the industries people are having a hard time hiring the people that they would like and everything, and those jobs are available. Some people are not wanting to go.
Yeah, I've addressed that. The second part of what you said was.
Let's get to Sasha. Let's go to Sasha Star real quick and get his opinion about these issues. He's been waiting patiently. Sasha,
you just let Mark repeat that second bit, because I think you should respond to it as well. Repeat the second part of what you think the plan should be.
I mean, part of the plan that I've said is that they need to have, and I'm not sure which part you're talking about, but there's a couple of things. One, that you can get programs for education to give them better education so that they can definitely get the jobs. We can also get programs in place that will give them better access to the jobs and everything, because there's a lot of jobs that are available, as you yourself has stated, that are not being put into place and everything. So there are a lot of ways that we can do these things and everything. There are even buildings that are not being used, and we can even find ways to make that available. So there's a lot of things that are in that we can talk about on a not just a theoretical, but a practical way.
The second thing that you talked about, Mark, was about their rents going up. So I take
the rents. Oh, so sorry. Yes, the rents are going up.
Private landlords are now supposed to take the part of being the government. They're supposed to subsidize the lifestyles of people who can't afford the houses that they live in, rather than the taxpayer doing it. And if they don't, then they're these horrible absentee landlords. Does that fly in Canada, Sasha?
First off, before Sasha answers,
let's Sasha start, please. Let Sasha get his opinion.
Yeah, let Sasha.
And then we'll go back to Mark. Sasha.
I think the solution is to give all people who want it and need it 3-bedroom houses, a couple of Lexuses, so they could drive reasonably well and being protected while driving, pay for their car insurance just as well, and home insurance, of course, and fill their tanks with gasoline as well. Who's going to pay for all that? That's unclear to me, but it doesn't matter. You can issue another $10 trillion or so, maybe $20 trillion would do. And so people will be ever happy, and the debt of the United States will increase substantially, but who cares? US is the only country in the world who can print dollars. Nobody else can. So, like Warren Buffett said, how the only country in the world that can print US dollars can go bankrupt? There's no way. It will just more and more.
That's true. They may not go bankrupt, but what you could see is the Middle East have enough and say we're gonna remove the peg on our currency against the US dollar, and we're going to allow oil to float in different currencies.
Yeah, then we go to Russian rubles and Chinese.
But I'll address what you said before, Sasha, about if you gave everyone in America a Lexus and a 3-bedroom house, you know what you would get? You'd get more whinging, because people would say, "Oh, but I have a 3-bedroom house. Everybody has a Lexus. Now I want to have a Ferrari. Now I want to," whatever the people who actually work and are successful have, that's what I want. So if everybody else goes out and buys a 6-bedroom house, they're going to be unhappy. Just like they were unhappy when once upon a time they didn't have TVs. Now they've got TVs, internet, 2 cars in the driveway. You know, the kids are running around in stolen Adidas and Gucci gear because apparently looting is the new thing, and they're so hard done by.
Shaquille, I have even better questions. Coming back to what Mark said about better education, who is going to provide that better education if there will be a very short supply of teachers, never mind good teachers, who are able to provide good education? How you will attract them? Because the teachers and medical workers, which are in a very short supply now and very big demand at the same time, how you are going to maneuver all that? So you have to offer them, especially good teachers, exorbitant salaries of well over $100,000 to attract them to teach. How you will afford to pay to these teachers, and if not, how people will get better education?
And that's a good question. I'm gonna throw in my first jab, not the last jab, but to talk about, so Shaquille, I know you always push back on why race becomes such a factor when we're looking at things like housing and land use and everything. And I know you're gonna laugh, but I am a moderate. Maybe you're not gonna laugh like Mark. And I do believe that businesses have the right to make money and that we shouldn't force these businesses to be like governments and make investments they're going to kick into their profits because they do take a lot of risk. But at the same time, though, here's my first jab. I think I disagree with Governor of Virginia Youngkin, the new governor, that says
Oh,
that
what a surprise.
but I mean, here's the thing. We have to look at race. I'm not saying that you go to every conversation assuming your race is a part of the conversation, but the data and numbers show that 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 only 45% of Black Americans own homes.
So,
About 13% are incarcerated in prisons, and there
so
is but it is a so, and that you have to factor that in. That Black
yeah,
Americans
okay,
right now aren't now.
so let's factor
Maybe
that in. Let's
but
factor
maybe the
that in.
policies need to change. Maybe we need to
Okay.
factor that. I'm not saying that you give free
Yeah.
handouts, guys.
No,
I
no.
work 12 hours a day till 9 o'clock at night.
Let's
You ain't making
factor
money
this
if you
in.
work from 9 to 5.
Let's factor this in, okay? Because we got to examine government policy and just have a look at how the government deals with these issues.
Yes.
13% of African American people are incarcerated. Okay, that's terribly
roughly speaking, the numbers.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's terribly high. I agree with you that it's terribly high. What would be the solution? One solution
the court
is
system.
Hang
It
on,
is
Mark.
very much a
Hang on.
racist court system.
Hang on. One solution would be that you actually release a whole heap of Black people from prisons. That doesn't seem like a particularly good idea, depending on what crimes that they've committed. Now, another solution might be that you actually examine the sentences that Black people have gotten, compare it to sentences for similar crimes committed by white people in the same area. And if there is substantial differences between the sentences, then perhaps you have a review board that acts to reduce the sentences. And in some places, that's what's actually happening. The third thing you could do is you change the statistic by locking up more white people. Now, what do we think America has done over the last 10 years? See, because before, the prison population was disproportionately Black. There wasn't enough, the Black people were overrepresented in prisons compared to whites. So what did the government do in the United States, across many of the states and the federal government? What did you guys do? You locked up more white people. Now, did that solve the problem for the Black community? Is there anybody in the Black community today that says, you know what, my brother, my cousin, my son, my uncle, whoever is currently locked up? We think that they got a sentence that they should not have been given. It was really, really harsh. But I feel better now knowing that we've actually hurt some white people as well. No. And that's
back up. First off,
hang on. That is the reason why I'm always going to push back on this, because there is never a solution offered as to how to actually address the root causes of the lack of home ownership or the high incarceration rates, the high dropout, the high amounts of school dropouts, the higher amounts of teen pregnancy amongst the community of color. That is never addressed. All that is addressed to solve the issue is let's make the statistics look better by hurting white people, and that's absolutely
First off, that's absolutely incorrect. I know of several programs that
I'll bring up the
address
stats
exactly what you said. I know several programs that address exactly what you just said on a national level, on a local level, and on a statewide level, where they are trying to address the root causes of what you are talking about. They are dealing with the pregnancy issue. They are dealing with this financial issue. They're dealing with a lot of other issues. There are specific programs. I'm not going to sit here and name them and everything because there are specific programs that are addressing that and everything, and they're looking even at the prison system. But yes, those figures. Hold on, Shaquille. First off, those figures are not. You got to prove to me first off.
Programs that seek to judge people by their skin color and favor one group over the other. That is the only thing that you've ever been able to give me as an example. I've asked you that over and over and over.
I will come to you in the next week or two, and I will bring you some programs to talk about exactly what you're saying. They want to address the things about the pregnancy issue. They want to address things around that. Spirit House is one. Spirit House is doing that. Yes, they may deal with racism as part of it and everything, but they also talk about the root causes that you're talking about.
Let's go to our final issue of the day. But we're going to devote a big part of it tomorrow. Real quickly, going to go around the room in 1 minute or less. I want you to say, what do you think Vladimir Putin is doing with his strategy for Ukraine? We're going to start with Sasha Starr. President Biden has said on the 19th of January that there will be consequences if he attacks Ukraine. 100,000 people on the border. Sasha, do you think Putin's calling our bluff, or do you think he's going in?
You have to really understand what is Putin aiming for. What is exactly his goal? To fight Ukrainians? Of course not. Who needs that? Ukraine is nothing but liability. Okay, he doesn't need that. What he really wants, he wants a respect. He wants to West to agree, leave Russia alone, stop pursuing Putin and his friends, and have the actions against them, or injunctions, or all this international sanctions and everything else. Essentially, they're saying that, look, who are you to give us rules of what to do? All your people are criminals or former criminals. Take all your presidents, they're former slave owners or drug dealers, or we started 200 years later than you are. So, of course, our people and top people, yeah, probably they broke the rule of law somewhere. They did something not very nice. Maybe they killed hundreds of people, but it doesn't matter. Today, we are independent country, and we want to do whatever we want. Leave us alone. And if you don't want to do it, then try to evaluate the size of our arsenal, all our rockets and bombs and everything else what we have. Do you want in your right mind to fight us? Of course not. So then move on and leave us alone.
Shaquille Latimer, your last thought on and we're going to talk about this tomorrow on tomorrow's show. I'm going to give some analysis as I open up my monologue on the history of Ukraine, to my knowledge, of why it's such an important part of this, the Soviet area, and what are driving Putin's decisions. But Shaquille, at the end of the day, do you believe Putin is being strategic here? Do you believe that he's actually using this as a way to force a more of an anti-West Ukraine, saying that you need to ally with Russia, and that he's just trying to call our bluff, or do you really believe that he's going in?
Look, I don't know the geopolitical issues in that area well enough, and certainly I'd refer to Sasha, because obviously somebody who lived there. What I would say is that I think that Putin, as a general rule, is going to be very strategic about what he's doing. I think that he would see there as being a lot of weakness in the leadership of the West at the moment. And the sort of veiled threat from the United States at the moment, presumably on behalf of its allies as well, is that if Putin and Russia does anything, well, there could be, a war as a result. Really, because you just pulled out of Afghanistan. So, like, if you're gonna actually go and deal with something, you might want to deal with something like Afghanistan, which has, which is a really strategic place, rather than trying to interfere with Russia-Ukrainian relationships. And short of Ukraine asking the United Nations for assistance and for some sort of diplomatic, a diplomatic intervention, I'm not sure it is our place in the West to go and interfere in the relationship between Russia and the Ukraine, especially when we're not bothering to do that in countries that are much more closely aligned to us. I don't really understand the logic of this.
Okay, and we're going to talk about that tomorrow. That's a great segue as we begin the program. We're going to spend 30 minutes or so talking about, Sasha, sort of defer to you as well as someone that knows this area better, but I've gone through and done some analysis about the history of Ukraine. How long has it been an independent republic? What are some of the things that happened along the way that have made this relationship more tense? And there's actually there was some of the presidents of Ukraine up before Zelensky were more pro Russia. Mark, any final thoughts before we close out the show today?
Well, a couple of things. One, and Shaquille love this one and everything, but in terms of foreign policy, I am not a big fan of us interfering in other nations' concerns and things along those lines, because I sometimes think that is not something that we need to be doing. They need to be allowed to handle their own matters in their own way. I mean, we can try to, if there are needs that are humanitarian help in those senses, because there are definitely some countries in both Africa, Asia, and or just around the globe that have needed our humanitarian help. and all of that. So that's one of the things that I would prefer us to do. Some people might say that is more of a isolationist view and things along that line, but definitely I think that a lot of those countries do not need us playing policemen, and sometimes we have this bad habit of doing that. And all along those lines, now there are some things in terms of human rights and definitely human needs that we can definitely address those concerns when they're happening and support those that are in those countries fighting against those kind of concerns. I mean, I have no problem with us on a back end kind of way, even helping some of the people that are concerned about women's rights and things along those lines in some of those more repressive countries, some of those that are in Asia, some that are in Africa and other places. But at the end of the day, it's the countries themselves that have to make those changes. I don't think we can go in there and force those changes on them and everything along those lines. I was just going to come back really quickly, and we can bring it up on tomorrow and everything. And I do want to apologize for running late and everything, but it was part of a 9-day marathon that it caught me off guard and everything, and that I finally paid the price for it and all of that. But I will be back in full effect, even though I've had a nice little tit-to-tat with Shaquille today. So you should really be looking forward to tomorrow when I'll be even more tip-top shape and everything along those lines and everything. So I'm glad to see you back, Shaquille, and hope that
this warm-up session, Mark,
on a regular basis and all of that. But one of the things I was going to say really quickly, because I know Steve's got to end, is I just got a letter yesterday from the one of our more liberal people that are involved in the whole COVID strike and the whole COVID kind of things that are going on. And one of the things that they were saying was that concerns that they had about what's going on with our healthcare facilities and our educators in terms of they're not doing enough to protect the classrooms, because they were saying that bus drivers, cafeteria workers, and everyone have been exposed. So it comes back to what Sasha was talking about, but on a different issue, is creating staff shortages, and therefore there's got to be ways to address these staff shortages that are impacting what's going on. And
I have an idea.
We'll talk about that.
I have an idea. I have an idea
how
how to address it. I actually have an idea.
Okay,
sack them, right? I know the nursing, the teachers' unions and all that won't like it, but just sack them, get rid of them, and get other people in that actually want to do the job. I think that would help education.
On that note, folks, this has been a great edition following on the heels of, this new format as we get to Roku Network, sort of like a modern-day Young Turks, not being hosted by a progressive, but a more moderate Steve Rao on World Edition with Mark Lee. Laugh all you want, Shaquille. Love you bringing the fire. I think our ratings are back. We've got the fire in the belly. And on that note, I'll close out with this. My last jab. I'm going to begin, and I take everyone off the screen. This is my closing monologue. On a national radio show on Sirius XM, I was asked a question of whether American democracy has declined. It was a hard question for me to answer, but what I said that I think it's not a Republican or Democratic issue. I think the fact of the matter is we have to start accepting the outcomes of elections and getting ourselves to a place where we can respectfully disagree with each other, but keep the business of the nation moving forward. I think this is not happening today in America when states that are right now being run by Republicans are changing the laws so that they can affect the outcomes of elections, taking away powers from the Secretary of State in Georgia, moving powers in Arizona from the Secretary of State to a Republican Attorney General. But it's not only a Republican issue. The danger is that any political party shouldn't be deciding who votes for them. Any political party should not be deciding the outcomes of the elections. We need to let this be driven by the democracy. And like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, at the end of a long game of political battle, we have to put the results aside and we have to accept the outcome. And we have to get back to moving the ball down the field, which is what I think the American people want. They want results. They want a government that's working. And I can tell you right now, it's 4th and long, and the government right now isn't working for the people. We need to get back ourselves a place. And that's what we're going to do on World Edition. What are the plays here in the U.S. and around the world to get us back moving together? And hopefully you are respectful of the conversations that we have here. But that's all I have to say in my final take. Looking forward to tomorrow to talk about Ukraine, Russia, Wednesday, India Republic Day, Thursday, immigration, and continue to move ourselves to last month of being Pod TV, and then we will be part of Roku and we will be hopefully on your streaming device or even on your television. That's all I have today. This is Steve Rao signing off, January 24th. May the light and love of our hearts always lift us out of the darkness. And from our family to yours, we hope that wherever you are in the world, you're having a great day. Thank you.